You can't grow a tree without roots. That's not just a metaphor, it's a reality Pakistan continues to ignore while hoping for India's kind of economic miracle. When we talk about why Pakistan can never grow like India, we have to begin with the foundation. A nation's economic rise doesn't start with GDP numbers, highways, or mega projects. It starts with institutions, with systems, with stability. And this is where Pakistan's roots are weak, shallow, and repeatedly disrupted. You see, India didn't just get lucky. It didn't stumble into growth. It stayed the course. It built democratic consistency over decades. Governments changed, policies shifted, but the fundamental belief in constitutional continuity remained. That gave investors, businesses, and the people a sense of direction, a sense of control, and a belief that even if today is tough, tomorrow might be better because the system allows for progress. Now compare that to Pakistan. In just 75 years, the country has seen multiple military coups, countless prime ministers dismissed mid-term, and a judiciary often bending to the power of the day. There's no certainty. Investors don't know who will be in charge next year or even next month. Businesses hold back, not because they don't see opportunity, but because they can't predict the rules. One day, subsidies flow like rivers. The next, taxes hit like a hammer. Policies swing like a pendulum. And in that chaos, how do you grow? India, even with all its flaws, and yes, it has plenty built institutions that earn trust. The Election Commission of India, the Reserve Bank, the Supreme Court, these are not just buildings with names. They're pillars that have stood tall through political storms. The bureaucracy, love it or hate it, functions. There's a chain of command, a sense of process, and that gives the economy room to breathe. Foreign investors from Silicon Valley to Singapore trust the environment, not because it's perfect, but because it's predictable. That's power. In Pakistan, the military casts a long shadow over both foreign and domestic policy. When generals run the economy, there's little room for civilian expertise, and more importantly, there's no accountability. Civilian governments are often too weak to challenge entrenched interests, and so policies are not designed to serve the people, they're designed to serve the powerful. That's not governance, that's survival. Take India's liberalization in 1991. It wasn't just an economic shift. It was a signal to the world that India was ready to compete, ready to change. The political system held together during a crisis and came out stronger. Pakistan, on the other hand, goes to the IMF every few years like clockwork, not as a strategy, but as a desperate rescue. No country can grow when its economy is on life support every election cycle. And let's not ignore the media and civil society, critical components of any democracy. In India, they push back. They challenge. They investigate. In Pakistan, media often operates under fear, under threat, under control. When people can't speak, economies can't either. You need dissent. You need debate. You need dialogue, because that's how better policies are born. So no, Pakistan can't grow like India, not because it lacks talent, or ambition, or potential, but because it keeps chopping down its own roots every time they begin to take hold. Stability isn't optional. It's essential. You don't build skyscrapers on shifting sand, and until Pakistan stops rebuilding the same weak foundation again and again, it will never rise the way India has. And that's not fate, that's the consequence of broken roots. It ain't just about numbers, it's about vision. That's the truth too many policymakers in Pakistan still fail to grasp. You can keep chasing GDP growth, building one flashy project after another, announcing budget after budget full of short-term relief. But if there's no long-term vision driving the country, then it's just movement without direction. India didn't become one of the fastest growing economies in the world by accident. It wasn't magic. It was a calculated, decades, long bet on innovation, technology, and the power of structural reform. From its push for a service-led economy in the 90s to the development of a vast digital public infrastructure today, India showed what happens when a country doesn't just think about this year, but thinks 20 years ahead. Pakistan, in contrast, has been stuck in a cycle of fighting, one crisis after another, floods, power shortages, balance of payments problems, political instability, and the response has always been reactionary. Loans, subsidies, bailouts, and austerity, never a long-term blueprint, never a consistent economic philosophy. If there's any vision, it's constantly changing with the government, or worse, with the mood of the military establishment. That kind of inconsistency doesn't build prosperity. It builds confusion, and confusion kills growth. Take India's focus on digital infrastructure, a game changer. It wasn't just about putting smartphones in people's hands. It was about connecting over 1 billion people to financial systems, identity verification, and government services. Aadhaar, UPI, Digital India, these weren't random tech ideas. They were parts of a strategic, long-term plan to leapfrog into the digital economy. That digital backbone didn't just empower people, it unleashed startups, attracted global investment, and brought transparency to governance. That's vision. That's execution. Now look at Pakistan. There's no equivalent national strategy. The digital economy exists, but it's fragmented. There's no widespread digital infrastructure linking the population at scale. And when young entrepreneurs try to build something new, they're held back by outdated regulations, lack of funding, or a sudden change in government priorities. How can you build a tech future when your present is still stuck in paperwork, red tape, and policy U-turns? And this leads into another fundamental truth. You gotta play to your strengths if you know what they are. India knew what it had: a massive, educated, English-speaking population with talent in mathematics, science, and engineering. And instead of trying to be everything to everyone, India leaned into that strength. It became the back office of the world, then the brain of the digital economy. IT exports, global consulting, software services, these weren't accidental industries. They were built with policy support, infrastructure, and education. Pakistan also has talent, incredible talent, but it's underutilized, especially women. Half the population is effectively missing from the workforce. That's not just a gender issue, that's an economic tragedy. And education, underfunded, poorly managed, and deeply unequal. You can't compete in a 21st century global economy when your schools are stuck in the 20th, or in some places, even earlier. India invested in IIT, in research, in innovation ecosystem. Pakistan, by contrast, is still debating curriculum standards, while universities remain under threat of ideological control or political interference. Playing to your strengths means identifying them honestly and building systems around them. Pakistan hasn't done that. It's tried to copy models that don't fit, chase growth sectors without building the foundation, and ignore the immense human potential within its own borders. You can't win a race like that. You can't run without knowing what muscle to train. So again, it's not about chasing India, it's about understanding why India pulled ahead, because they had a vision, because they knew their strength, and because they were willing to back both with consistent policy, real investment, and the courage to think long term. No peace, no progress. That's not just a slogan, it's an economic fact. When a country lives in a constant state of geopolitical tension, when its internal security is fragile, and its borders are hot zones instead of trade corridors, growth becomes a distant dream. And this is exactly where Pakistan finds itself stuck. The shadow of conflict, both external and internal, has loomed large over its economy for decades. Whether it's with India, Afghanistan, or within its own provinces, Pakistan's inability to secure sustained peace has drained resources, scared off investors, and closed the doors to regional trade, the very engine that helped India accelerate. Let's look at India. Despite having its own security challenges, and yes, they are real, India has managed to maintain relative internal stability, especially in its major economic zones. That stability is not just good for governance, it's fuel for business. Investors care about profit, yes, but above all, they care about safety and certainty. If there's a bomb blast every month or political protests blocking roads every week, no one wants to build a factory or fund a startup. India understood this. It kept its economic zones secure, built infrastructure around them, and used stability as a magnet to pull in global capital. Now contrast that with Pakistan. Karachi, once the commercial heart of the country, was for years plagued by political turf wars, gang violence, and ethnic clashes. The tribal areas have long been under the influence of militant groups. Balochistan continues to suffer from separatist insurgencies. Even Islamabad isn't immune from instability. One day it's parliament, the next day it's protests. And when your capital city becomes a battleground for power, it sends a very loud message to the world. This is not a safe place for business. The economic cost of this insecurity is staggering. Tourism never took off. Foreign direct investment comes in waves, but rarely stays. Trade agreements are often blocked by political mistrust. Pakistan's economy remains cut off from its own region. SAARC, the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, could have been a platform for mutual growth, but it's been paralyzed largely due to hostile India-Pakistan relations. And while India has diversified its trade network across ASEAN, the Middle East, and Africa, Pakistan is largely dependent on a few partners, namely China and the Gulf states, leaving it vulnerable and isolated. Even more damaging is the military-first mindset. A significant portion of Pakistan's national budget is consumed by defense spending, and when you prioritize guns over growth, classrooms suffer, hospitals decay, and infrastructure stalls. India, too, spends on defense, but it doesn't let it dominate the national agenda in the same way. India built roads that led to markets. Pakistan built roads that led to outposts. That's the difference in vision. Security isn't just about stopping bullets. It's about creating an environment where people can dream beyond survival, where students walk to school without fear, where businesses know the rules won't change overnight, where regions trade goods instead of accusations. India, despite its issues, has managed to create that environment more often than not. Pakistan has not, and that's why the economic gap keeps growing. You can't grow crops in a war zone. You can't build trust in chaos. And you certainly can't attract investors when the only headlines they see are about blasts, arrests, and shutdowns. Stability isn't a luxury, it's the soil in which prosperity grows. Until Pakistan learns to value peace as its most strategic economic asset, growth will remain a story others tell. You don't grow by copying, you grow by competing. That's the rule of every serious economy in the world, and it's the rule Pakistan has refused to learn. For decades, Pakistan's economic strategy has been reactive, not proactive. It looks at what India or China is doing and tries to replicate pieces of it, without building the systems or institutions to support those efforts. But growth doesn't come from imitation. It comes from innovation. It comes from identifying your unique edge, developing it with discipline, and then stepping into the global market not as a follower, but as a competitor. That's what India did, and that's what Pakistan has failed to do. India's economic transformation wasn't built overnight, and it wasn't about copying someone else's model. It made bold, often painful, reforms. It liberalized its economy in the 1990s, opened its markets to global players, and put its weight behind sectors where it had comparative advantage: IT, pharmaceuticals, engineering, and now, clean energy and digital services. India didn't just ride the wave, it built the surfboard. It trained a generation of professionals, created policy frameworks to support enterprise, and invited global companies to make India their home. That's what competition looks like. Meanwhile, Pakistan stayed stuck in protectionist habits. It built walls instead of bridges. Domestic industries were shielded from competition through tariffs and subsidies, not sharpened to stand on their own in the global marketplace. Instead of opening up its economy to new ideas and technologies, Pakistan often retreated into outdated thinking, keeping its private sector dependent on state favors and connections. That's not how you grow, that's how you stall. Take exports, for example. India's exports have diversified over the years, not just in goods, but in services. It exports software, consulting, design, digital finance, the cutting edge of the modern economy. Pakistan, on the other hand, still relies heavily on a narrow range of textile products. And even within textiles, productivity remains low, innovation is minimal, and global market share is shrinking. There's been little move toward value addition, branding, or automation, because instead of trying to out-compete the world, Pakistan has often settled for just getting by. This failure to compete has deep roots. It's not just about trade policy, it's about mindset. In India, success stories are cultivated and celebrated. Entrepreneurs are encouraged. Risk takers find support. The startup ecosystem, powered by both private capital and government initiatives, has exploded. Pakistan's startup space, while showing signs of life, remains stunted by a lack of investor confidence, policy uncertainty, and weak regulatory structures. Copying India's startup policies or announcing a digital Pakistan campaign won't change that unless the deeper ecosystem is fixed. Moreover, Pakistan has often tied itself too closely to one or two partners, mainly China, instead of building a balanced, competitive presence in multiple markets. While the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor (CPEC) promised transformation, it has so far delivered more debt than dynamism. True competition means being able to stand on your own, diversify your risks, and build independent leverage. India has trade ties from the U.S. to Japan, from Europe to Africa. Pakistan, by contrast, remains isolated by both policy and politics. The global economy doesn't reward those who follow, it rewards those who lead, who adapt, who compete fiercely. Pakistan must stop trying to chase India's shadow and start figuring out what it can uniquely offer to the world. It must create policies that encourage competitiveness, not comfort zones. Because until Pakistan builds an economy that can fight for its place at the global table, growth will remain just a slogan, not a strategy. It's not about the hustle, it's about the foundation. Pakistan has never lacked hustle. Its people are hardworking, resourceful, and incredibly resilient. You see it every day in the streets, in the markets, in small businesses scraping by despite impossible odds. But hustle without a strong foundation doesn't lead to national prosperity. It leads to exhaustion. It leads to survival, not success. And that's the tragedy of Pakistan's economic story. The country has relied too long on the energy of its people, without giving them the systems, institutions, and stability they need to truly build wealth. You can't sprint your way to development, you need to lay bricks, step by step. Now contrast this with India. India understood early on that you don't build a skyscraper without digging deep first. It focused on creating robust institutions, independent courts, regulatory bodies, central banking frameworks, and bureaucratic systems that, while imperfect, generally function. These institutions provided continuity. They provided trust. That trust not just in political leadership, but in the rules of the game is what made businesses grow, what attracted investment and what allowed long-term projects to flourish. In Pakistan, the foundations have been shaky from the start. The political institutions are weak and frequently undermined by non-democratic forces. The central bank has often lacked autonomy. Tax policy changes with every new administration, sometimes even within the same year. Investors, both local and foreign, don't know what to expect, and that unpredictability is poison for growth. One moment there's a policy promising support for businesses, and the next it's reversed or suspended under pressure. You can't build with that kind of instability under your feet. Even the legal system, one of the cornerstones of a functioning economy, struggles in Pakistan. Contracts are difficult to enforce. Litigation takes years. Corruption seeps into every level of bureaucracy. And in this environment, small businesses don't scale. Foreign firms stay cautious. Innovation takes a backseat because entrepreneurs are too busy fighting paperwork and policy confusion to focus on creativity. Look at how India handled its central bank, the Reserve Bank of India. It has remained largely independent. It gives confidence that monetary policy won't just be dictated by political convenience. Its inflation targeting framework, its regulatory strength, these things matter. They tell the world, this country may have challenges, but it knows how to manage them. Pakistan, by contrast, has seen its monetary policy pulled in multiple directions. At times, the central bank has had to act more like a political tool than a financial steward. That erodes confidence, it erodes currency stability, and it erodes the foundation every investor needs. Infrastructure is another part of the foundation. Yes, Pakistan has built roads and ports, especially under CPEC, but much of it has been driven by debt rather than development strategy. Projects were often not based on national needs or long-term economic returns, but on geopolitical alignments. Infrastructure for the sake of optics is not infrastructure at all. Meanwhile, India built industrial corridors, logistics hubs, and integrated them with trade policy and local manufacturing. That's how you use infrastructure to grow, not just to show. And then there's governance. India, despite all its political drama, has largely kept the machinery of state running, whether it's delivering vaccines, running nationwide identity systems, or coordinating financial inclusion. In Pakistan, basic administrative failures continue to hold back progress, from census mismanagement to inconsistent public service delivery. So yes, the hustle is real in Pakistan. But without a solid foundation, built on strong institutions, reliable governance, and consistent policy, that hustle will never translate into the kind of national growth story we see in India. The skyscraper cannot stand if the ground beneath it keeps shifting. Every economy is powered by its people, by what they know, what they can build, and what opportunities they're given to rise. And here lies one of the most painful truths about why Pakistan continues to lag behind India in economic growth: the human capital gap. It's not a matter of intelligence or talent. Pakistanis are just as capable, just as ambitious, just as hungry for success as anyone else. But the systems to develop that potential, to educate, to train, to uplift, are broken. And without educated, skilled, and healthy people, no country, no matter how rich in resources, can move forward. India understood that human capital is not a side issue, it is the core of long-term growth. Beginning with the establishment of the Indian Institutes of Technology (IITs) and the Indian Institutes of Management (IIMs, India made a strategic choice to invest heavily in higher education. It created technical institutions that became world-class and produced generations of engineers, scientists, and entrepreneurs who now lead global companies. But it didn't stop there. India expanded access to basic education, improved literacy, and in recent years has digitized classrooms and brought millions of students online through platforms like Diksha and PME Vidya. These are not just policies. These are pipelines of talent that feed into every sector of the economy. Pakistan, on the other hand, has suffered from decades of neglect in education. Public schools are underfunded, under-equipped, and overcrowded. Teachers are poorly trained, and in some rural areas they don't show up at all. The curriculum is outdated and, in some cases, dangerously politicized. And then there's the divide, a vast chasm between the elite English, medium private schools and the struggling Urdu medium public ones. 2 generations of children are growing up in 2 different worlds. That's not an education system, that's an inequality machine. But education is only part of the story. Health is another pillar of human capital, and it's one Pakistan has also failed to prioritize. Malnutrition, child stunting, and poor maternal health are still widespread. Public hospitals are overcrowded and under-resourced. A sick nation cannot be a productive one, and the tragedy is, this is a cycle. Poor health leads to poor learning leads to poor employment leads to poverty, and the cycle repeats. India, though far from perfect, has made significant strides in health care. Its government vaccination programs have reached millions. It implemented the Ayushman Bharat scheme, the world's largest government-funded health insurance program to protect its poorest citizens, and most importantly, it has integrated technology into both healthcare and education. That's how you scale progress in a country of 4 billion people. That's how you make sure the system lifts everyone, not just a privileged few. And we can't ignore gender. In India, female labor force participation is still low, but it's growing. Women are entering boardrooms, startups, universities, and public service. In Pakistan, the picture is far worse. Cultural and structural barriers keep women out of the economy, out of schools, out of leadership roles. And let's be clear, when half your population is missing from the workforce, you're not running at full speed, you're crawling. So while India continues to expand and deepen its pool of skilled, educated, and empowered citizens, Pakistan's human capital remains underdeveloped, underutilized, and under threat. No amount of infrastructure or foreign investment can substitute for a nation's people. You build an economy not just with money, but with minds. And until Pakistan makes human development its top priority, it will continue to watch others move forward while it stands still.